I'm Benjamin Yap.
I'm Eli Sands.
日本の映画監督黒沢清です。
You're listening to Deep Cut. On Deep Cut, we compare a director's most popular film with a personal favorite chosen by one of us.
We also discuss the director's life and career to bring context that helps us view their movies as they may want us to.
If you're enjoying Deep Cut, please rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to help others discover the show. Better still, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or comment on episodes directly on Spotify. If you'd like to share a message with us, please feel free to drop us an email at hello@deepcutpod.com. You can also find us at deepcutpod.com to find links to our socials, Discord, and Patreon. Ben!
We have an incredible episode that we just recorded. Eli's losing his shit.
We did it!
You already know because you clicked on this episode. We just interviewed Kiyoshi
Kurosawa-san!
Who we've been covering for how long? Since, I guess, last year. 2 years ago at this point?
I think 2 years ago. I think it was 2024.
Yeah, a discovery for, I guess, all of us, because like something that we kind of were working through together in a sort of reboot of the podcast in some ways. Kurosawa gave us life, and he has given us life again.
So true.
Yeah, with his new film, The Samurai and the Prisoner, which you will also see probably, I think, releasing today as well, or maybe already out, our discussion about watching the film. Unfortunately, Wilson was not able to make this interview with us, but we had a really good time interviewing Kurosawa-san.
I feel so pleased because, you know, obviously we were both like buzzing before the interview and intimidated, but very quickly it felt like a conversation where he kind of got what we were asking and was like picking up what we were putting down and vice versa. Also, of course, we have to thank up top Divergent PR, who is representing this film in its publicity, in particular Ryanne Gordon and Benkei Golden, who really connected with us and shepherded us through this process. And our translator, who is working with Kurosawa-san, Monika Uchiyama, who was phenomenal. And I think, as Ben was just saying to me off mic, like, knows his movies, clearly.
While we were talking to them, we could tell that she knew exactly what we were talking about, which is actually a rare experience because sometimes translators don't know ball, and it's like harder for them to talk about the film. So we're really, really pleased by that. Thank you so much, Monika. And
yeah, thank you.
I got Kurosawa to tell me that my Japanese was good, which is so funny.
Yeah, wait, in the edit, you have to include you, like, introducing our show to Kurosawa-san, because that was, my mouth was open.
I think without further ado, we're going to allow you to listen to our interview with Mr. Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Enjoy.
Enjoy.
Konnichiwa, Kurosawa-san.
Konnichiwa.
はい。どっちも来なかった。
ポッドキャストにホストが2人いるみたいな。
なるほど、なるほど、すごい。
はい、そう。
こんにちは。
私、ベンジャミンと申します。ニューヨークにいる人はイライです。私たちは英語のフィルムポッドキャスト持っています。
はい、わかる。
私たちは黒沢さんの作品は大ファンです。ポッドキャストでたくさん映画を紹介しています。この機会は本当にとても嬉しいです。よろしくお願いします。
どうもありがとうございます。よろしくお願いします。
私の日本語はここまでです。
はい、素晴らしい。perfect です。
これから英語で、
どうも
ありがとうございます。I think we'll just start beginning with the questions. I think Eli will do the first one, but this was a great, and we're really excited to do this.
Very excited. All your films make commentary on social structures and how they affect people, sometimes causing them to do extreme things. What would you say you're examining in The Samurai and the Prisoner? How does it relate to our current age? Why are you drawn to a rebel like Murashige?
もちろんこれは原作がある物語ですし、荒木村重という人は実在した人物で、歴史的事実に沿って 物語を作られています。
So this movie is based on a novel, and Araki Murashige is an actual historical figure, and so the story is built around historical truths. But as you mentioned, I do think that this protagonist is similar to many of the other protagonists that I featured in my prior films. I seem to be interested in these types of figures. Araki Murashige is a feudal lord that came to power, but very strangely decides to discard of and let go of his power. In that sense, he's similar to other films of mine in which particular social structures or values are influencing a certain protagonist, and when suddenly they decide to leave that society or pushed out of it in order to go their own way, oftentimes going so far as to become a criminal. So that is often the conclusion and the pattern that some of my films follow. So it was very exciting for me to encounter this historical figure who seemed to share a kind of background.
I think following on from that, with Murashige as your main character, in this film you have the character of Chiyoho, who is a sort of lone female character in a world that is dominated by men, very similar to Akiko in Cloud, and in even your other films like Ends of the Earth and Wife of a Spy. And so you kind of have this archetype of a woman that's revealing her agency in a world dominated by men. What fascinates you about this archetype as well?
そうなんですよね。なんて、そういうキャラクターには非常に興味を持ち、かつ惹かれます。
Yeah, it's true that I'm interested and attracted to these types of characters. So women who are existing within a male-dominated society and are trying to trudge through despite this system that oppresses them. And sometimes in my films, they also end up becoming criminals. And so I notice that these types of women characters do appear in my films often, but part of me wonders if that's what these women characters would want in these narratives or in these worlds. In a sense, I almost feel like my appreciation and admiration of them kind of makes a kind of 180 and is actually a kind of sign of some kind of bias that I have towards them. Like, what is it that I'm anticipating from these women characters? It's not as if only women are pushed to the margins and only women have to struggle through, to struggle to survive within a system. So it is something that I very much recognize in myself, that I kind of look for and want to see certain qualities in the women characters in my films, but it's very hard for me to explain why.
Thank you. In addition to your main characters and female characters, another important staple of your films is the plastic sheet, which your main characters encounter and often must pass through to reach the violent climax. In The Samurai and the Prisoner, this shows up as the silk sheet that Murashige passes before he confronts Chiyoho. Why does the symbol of the plastic sheet show up across your films?
はい。いや、また、ああいうものを出してくるのが好きなんですよね。あまり自分で理由をつけてはいないのですが。
I can't explain the reasoning for this, but I just happen to love the plastic sheet. And I think that for a character, when you encounter something that's in front of you, that's an obstacle, and you can't see beyond you, there's also the sense that there is a world beyond that's waiting to be discovered. And the best way to express that is something that's transparent or semi-transparent, because then you can't see what exactly lies on the other side, but you can confirm that something actually is there. And so I seem to be predisposed to using these plastic sheets because I'm mesmerized by them, and if there's an opportunity, I find myself wanting to incorporate them into the production design. Now, with this film, the silk sheet was not at all part of my own direction or my intention. My production designer brought this to me and said, "Director, I know you love these sheets." And I thought, this is the one film where I won't have to use a plastic sheet. But when they brought this silk fabric over to me, I was like, well, I have to incorporate it. So in a sense, I felt like it was destined to be in the film.
That I mean, I'm so thrilled to hear that. The plastic sheet has been a personal fascination for me for so long, so I'm delighted to hear that. Speaking of that scene, the Samurai and the Prisoner has these elaborately staged long takes, such as that moment with Chiyoho and Murashige at the climax. Do you plan out the blocking of camera and actors beforehand, or do you more so discover it on set? Do you feel that your approach, either way, reflects or represents the social ideas that you're investigating?
そうですね、俳優、長いワンテイクの時に、俳優がどこに立ってどう動く。で、またカメラがその時どこにいるのかっていうのは、かなり事前に。
Yes, so of course, with the long takes required, the blocking of the actors and the placement of the camera is something that I carefully plan and decide on prior to cranking it on set. But there's always new discoveries and new movements that I find once we start shooting. And so things change and I inch towards a kind of ideal form before we finally decide to shoot. And the scene that you were describing with Murashige and Chiyoho, things that were important to highlight were their relationship, their distance from one another, who is standing and who is kneeling at any certain time. And in that space, the kind of central point of interest is the Buddhist altar. So the distance from between the characters and the altar was also very important. As you see at the very end, Chiyoho grabs Murashige's arm and drags him towards the altar. And that is also a kind of visual representation of the content of her long monologue and this inner struggle that Murashige goes through as he listens. So to have a visual depiction of their power imbalance and struggle was very important. I might add that, 16th century Japan, which is where this film takes place, I was trying my best to recreate the world as it was back then, but we certainly don't have any existing spaces that appear just like 16th century Japan. So that means creating that world through the use of sets. And in the case of the scene with Murashige and Chiyoho, that is actually filmed in a space within an existing temple in Kyoto. And with each of these spaces, there is this kind of exact area that you can frame that allows for a kind of realism to happen. But if you move the camera just 1 inch, then suddenly you're confronted with contemporary Japan. So within the constraints of that very limited space, I feel the desire to use what I can from edge to edge to try to make as an expansive, realistic world as I can. And I imagine that's very similar to working in theater. I've never worked in theater before, so I don't know, but this idea of making use of a very limited space, trying to find freedom and expression within those constraints. So those are one of the challenges that I came up against as I was blocking and framing each scene.
Thank you for that answer and that idea of like using the full image that you can possibly get in contemporary times reminds me of a quote from other Kurosawa, Akira, where he said the exact same thing about Ran and the way that he shot the mountains. And thinking about Kurosawa, I wanted to ask, because in other interviews we saw that you mentioned looking at classic jidaigeki before making Kokorojo, and we also find that there's like elements of the Western as well as film noir in this film with like its dark prisons. And we were wondering, because we know that you're also a fan of like some of the 70s Hollywood new wave, like Fuller, Peckinpah, Schlesinger, whether there are other influences outside of Japanese cinema that influence how you approach this. Because something I remember when we talked about the film was that I was like, this is kind of like a Sherlock Holmes story, where it's less of a samurai film, it's more of a mystery film, more of a detective film.
はい、当然、僕は映画好きなので、いろいろな国のいろいろな時代の映画をたくさん見てきています。で、映画見るのが好きで、それが高じていつの間にか作る側に回った人間ですから。
Of course, I'm a cinephile, and so I've watched many movies across various eras and countries. I love watching movies, and I'm very lucky to be making them. Even though this is a jidaigeki, I think that I am influenced by the various films that I've watched and loved across my lifetime. And this time, although the original intention was to recreate the form of a classic jidaigeki, I can also kind of see an influence of 70s European art films, films by Federico Fellini or Bernardo Bertolucci, in the sense that they had a way of filming groups of people in a specific space, and their capturing of the crowd almost as spectacle, or viewing the crowd as a sort of spectacle. And I can see that, albeit unintentionally, seeping its way into this film. I could feel that I had this intense desire to, if possible, include as many of those characters in a single frame as I could. As far as the influence of film noir, I think, or even something like Sherlock Holmes, of course, there's a mystery element in the novel that the work is based on, but I don't know that there was any direct influence in that respect.
Thinking about the large groups, something we felt watching it is that there are some moments of comedy in this film, and sometimes it feels like a comedy of samurai manners. How intentional was this? Because it feels like Murashige highlights the absurdity of the men around him.
コメディを意図的に撮ろうとしたことはないんですが、おっしゃるように、
So I've never intentionally filmed a comedy, but as you said, maybe there are unintentional moments of humor with Murashige because he's someone who exists outside of the norms or the common sense or the social norms that exist in that time. I think that he at times veers away from those norms on his own. Sometimes it happens unintentionally and happens to him, but that is a very important part of his character. I think that many of my protagonists also share that, in that because they are veering away from these norms, there are moments of unintentional humor where I find that people in the theater are laughing and I think, how strange, because I didn't intend to make a comedy. I'm reminded of my experience of showing this film at Cannes. And as you can imagine, the audience was mostly filled with people from France or people from abroad or non-Japanese people. And they were consistently laughing, and I didn't understand why, but I took it as a sign that they were responding to and understanding something that was happening on screen. And then, of course, that is not a bad thing. So it was a strange experience, but something that I do notice across my works.
Thank you so much for your time. That's all our questions.
Right. Okay.
ありがとうございます。
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 Thank you. So that was an interview with Kiyoshi Kurosawa. We hope you enjoyed that. We certainly did.
Yes.
Being able to ask the questions that we've been wanting to ask him for a long time. I think what was really interesting was like how much he knew about his own fascination with the plastic sheet, which of course he knows. But it was just like funny, like that he was like talking about it in that way.
And clearly was like, I think, a little bit amused that we asked about it, and even maybe a little bit like bashful about, he was just like, It's just an object of fascination. And this is the beauty of, I mean, really art in general, but movie making in particular, where a creator can put in something simply because it is a fascination or it feels right. And it can take on all these different infinite resonances for however many people see the movie. That's one of, I think, the core tenets of our podcast, is that the design of the movie matters and the reception of it is equally important, and the context of it is also important. And we got all of those things in our conversation with Kurosawa-san.
I think what's interesting is like the thing about plastic sheet is like he just has this weird obsession with it. And I think like you need these weird obsessions when you're making stuff where you're like, I just like this thing and I'm gonna put it in no matter what. Even when I think I won't do it, it's coming and I guess I will put it in. And there's something interesting about that. There's almost something, almost like a non sequitur. It's like, I'm just gonna do it again.
Or it's like operating on a hunch, on a feeling.
Yeah, like this is something has been important to him as a motif throughout his film. So it feels like appropriate when the opportunity presents itself to appear again.
Yeah.
In a film that has no plastic, right? Is like pretty fascinating. We didn't really get to ask him his deep cut, but it was like interesting to hear him talk about European art cinema, or like just mentioning European art cinema as being a sort of maybe unconscious influence on him when he was making this.
Yeah.
Which I'm trying to unpack right now, thinking about that, which maybe makes sense in thinking about Fellini, because he has those like similar-ish medium long shots where there's like conversation happening in a big open space. I'm thinking right now of like La Dolce Vita.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. And that kind of makes sense from a visual perspective. And those films are also a lot in black and white. And this film is almost basically black and white, The Samurai and the Prisoner, in some ways, which kind of makes sense. And I'm really curious about those European releases, the Cannes release, where people are laughing at a lot of stuff he said, which I think is really funny, that he is like, I did not expect this to be a comedy at all, but he gets it, which is really cool, I think, like that he knows that the film will be what it needs to be outside of his own brain.
Yeah, I was fascinated that he said that he's never intentionally made a comedy. Because I think that while I certainly wouldn't call Tokyo Sonata or To the Ends of the Earth or License to Live comedies, I wouldn't call them straight up dramas either. And it seems like there's comedy by design in some of those movies, but he apparently doesn't feel that way.
I think we talked about this before with Kurosawa, which is that he has a sort of innate sense of humor about things, which makes sense as a horror filmmaker as well.
Absolutely.
Right. That's like that's kind of funny. It's not haha funny, but it's like it's a little funny when like the timing of something's off or like a loud sound appears out of nowhere. There's something, that's funny, right? And I think that's what I respond to in Samurai and the Prisoner. Like parts of it was like, it's kind of funny. It's kind of odd, like the way that they move around, or like the way they sycophantically like talk to Murashige is like kind of like, what's up with these dudes? You know what I mean?
And of course, horror and comedy are both body genres where they're designed to elicit a physical response from you.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that Kurosawa would be skilled at both. And then also that he, the thing that he cites from Fellini and Bertolucci is the use of bodies in the space, like these crowds as special effect, as he referred to it. I'm going to be looking out for that in his movies from now on as well.
I think I'm looking forward to rewatching this on the big screen. I believe it will come to Singapore.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will absolutely catch it on the big screen.
That was our interview with Kurosawa. We hope you enjoyed that, and we hope to have many more of these opportunities in the future.
Yeah, double thank you again to Divergent PR, to Ryanne Gordon, to Benkei Golden, and to Monika Uchiyama, the translator. Everyone was fantastic, and just what a privilege. This was so great. I'm gushing. It was so great.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Deep Cut. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to help others discover the show. A great way to support us is to leave a review or comment on our episodes directly on Spotify. If you want to chat with us and other fans of Deep Cut, come join our Discord server where we talk about movies, TV, music, and share what we're up to. If you'd like to share a message with us or have business inquiries, feel free to drop us an email at hello@deepcutpod.com. We also have a Patreon if you'd like to support us with a monthly subscription. Thank you to all our Patreon supporters, and a very special thanks to our Patreon Deep Cut pick supporter, Leah Lai. You can keep up with Deep Cut on Instagram and Letterboxd at DeepCutPod. Click the link in our description or go to deepcutpod.com to find links to everything we've mentioned here. Deep Cut is hosted and produced by us, Wilson Lai, Benjamin Yap, and Eli Sands. Our cover art is designed by Justina Yam, and our theme song is composed by myself.
I'm Ben.
I'm Eli. Take care, and we're looking forward to talking about more movies with you next time.